Ma'am.
So I see again a very less number of attendees today. Isn't the festive time over as yet? Please ask your classmates and everyone, please join the class. These classes are really important. Today I'm going to discuss air law, which is really difficult if you don't follow it. Right? Please ask the students to join in fast. I'll wait 4 to 5 minutes more, then we'll start the class. Yes, students, shall we start the class?
You can start the class, ma'am.
Okay. So yesterday I was giving you an introduction regarding air and space law, and we discussed the areas which we are going to take up in this very topic. So I'll be discussing and sharing the PPT with you in regards to the very first topic that we'll be discussing. We'll be discussing in detail in regards to the meaning of the airspace and international air law, and also we'll be talking about how it started to develop and what were various ideas which came in with time, and it started to grow. It started to increase its scope and ambit, right? And what were the stakes that came in between, and how these conventions related to aerospace law started to evolve and develop. Okay. And we'll talk about important conventions, right? So important conventions that are relating to the aerospace, or you can say aeronautical space, aerial space. These are all the similar versions which we'll be discussing in this, right? So starting with the very first, let me share the slides with you. Just let me know if you can see the slide. Just give me a moment. It's uploading. It is taking longer than its usual time. I don't know what's wrong. Students, can you see? It is sent from my end. Can you see it? It is in the chat box. I'll be sharing the screen as well.
Yes, ma'am.
You got it? Okay, fine, great. So let me share the screen as well. So let's start with the class. So the very first topic that we discussed yesterday as well, that I told you about the international air law and what are the areas which we are going to cover. So the first and very foremost thing, that is the meaning of airspace, right? So airspace hereby is defined as the which is a place, or you can a field of aviation where there is a scope to develop it, or in which it also involves international relations. So we are going to connect air law to the international space, international relations, or international law in that text. So we are going to study about airspace law in contention to international law. So it is international air law, right? So airspace was actually defined as a place in which there are international involved, and the field of aviation development develops in the space directly encircling the earth, which is filled to a greater or a lesser extent with air, that is with the bearing the name of airspace, right? So basically, the zones or areas that are above the sea or above the land, which is encircling the earth, and a state has its sovereignty over the airspace that is above its territory as well as its territorial sea. So, while we were talking about airspace and high seas, so high seas and beyond are areas which are unoccupied by any state territories. Similarly, airspace above these zones of high seas and beyond are also not under any jurisdiction of any other nation state. Okay, so it is the only state sovereignty is governing the airspace that is above its territory as well as its territorial sea. So, with time after the First World War came into, they were discussing about advents of land territories, state territories, as well as now it was the contention to discuss about the air territories. So with that, there was an emergence of various theories by various jurists, right? So it, made the development of the free air theory. This was the very first theory that came into picture while there was First World War happening. So the first, theory, that is the free air theory, means that the airspace is entirely free and open to all the nation states. Okay, so as it said that air by its very nature and character has been incapable to divide and to at least divide any zone or appropriate its areas, etc. Okay, so this is about the free air theory that was developed. This was analogy that was described was that there could not be any proportion for air to divide it amongst the territories. So the second theory came up with the idea that while the lower zone of airspace belongs to the state which is next, and the higher zone of the airspace is for all the people. So again, the area that is near to the atmospheric region, near to the state, near to the state land territory or sea territory, territorial sea, it is with the nation state, and the above zone is open for all. So this again theory was very based upon the idea that there are the state territorial airspace has to be controlled by the nation state, and therefore state will have only its sovereignty that is to upper zone and not to the the lower zone and not to the upper zone. But it was contradicted and again that absolute sovereignty up to a certain height is again a controversial idea. So it came to picture. Then again, there was another theory that was proposed that airspace has to be unlimited for the unlimited height above the subjacent state or the nation state which has its territory below the air above and beyond, unlimited height. Towards the unlimited height, it will have to cover the whole state. The airspace is absolute, unlimited, and it should be completely enjoyed as the state sovereignty. So, this view was again based on this principle, that is Quigus est solum and ejus est usquem ad possum et edifros. It means that the owner of the land ought to be taken to own right up to the sky. So the land who owns the land, that person, that the one who owns the land owns the sky up to its unlimited length and height. So with this, it also connotated the principle of innocent passage for foreign national, aircrafts. So there should be similar, that is innocent passage to merchant ships and through territorial waters. So innocent passage was allowed for for the aircrafts to travel in their skies above, but the owner will be the one who owns the land and who owns the sea and airspace above and beyond its whole of its height, right? So this was about the theories, how it got evolved, okay? And the zones again, the higher zone and lower zone, and thereafter the unlimited zone of free airspace, okay? Are you following, class? This is what we discussed yesterday also. Coming to the next point, that is international air law. So international air law is again a very, controversial term and a very uncertain and a debatable terminology. So international air law, that we discuss about international relations, international law with in relation or in continuation to the air law. So air law is primarily the body of rules governing the use of airspace and its benefits for aviation, general public, and nations of the world. So what you are going to study in international air law is the rules that govern the airspace. Airspace, that is what we just discussed. It is above the land and above the sea, the air, and that which is to unlimited length and height. And the land, who owns the land, owns the airspace. So that is about its sovereignty. So as far as a state owns the land and the sea, that is up to the territorial sea. Above it, the whole and unlimited airspace is owned and under the state territory, under the space, territory of the air of the nation state and it's under its sovereignty. So that is airspace. So air law is the rules, the body of rules that govern that airspace and whatever benefits that you take up from that aviation and general public and various nations of the world. So it revolves around public as well as nations of the world. That is why it is international air law. So what are the sources of international law? How can we study international law and what are the areas that involve the international air law? So firstly, there are multilateral conventions. There may be bilateral agreements in regards to various aspects that we'll be discussing, how we're going to use the aircrafts, the landing, the coming up of airlines, the creation of airports, right? The passenger as well as the clients, as well as the crew relationships and the airlines relationships, contracts between various companies, airline companies, and the nation states. Okay, and various general principles of law that dissect all of these rules. Are you following, class? Are you finding it interesting?
Yes,
Yes?
ma'am.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So these are the sources through which we are going to learn about international air law, right? So please do not confuse it with outer space law, which we'll be taking in the later segment, right? Right now, we are focusing on international air law. We are not discussing outer space law. Okay, so outer space will include satellites, it will include celestial bodies, etc., and moon and sun and everything, planets. That is beyond the airspace. That is the outer space. Okay, so right now we are just focusing on airspace. That is atmospheric space. So thereafter, we'll be discussing about these conventions. So the very first convention is about the Paris Convention. Again, as I told you yesterday, we were discussing about this convention, that this convention actually took before, it was codified before the idea of civil aviation came into picture. So the air law presently does not deal with, you know, issues such as air pollution, telecommunications, or military aviation. So it just focuses on state aircrafts, whereas, civil aviation or civil aeronautics, that is generally an accepted term for air law. Okay, so the first convention, that is the Paris Convention of 1919. Before the First World War came into the picture, and before that also there was an existence. There was, the airspace over the territory of the state was there, and there was no actual definition or regulation in regards to its usage or its there were constant fights because there were German balloons and there were French as well as these they started hot air balloons. So the German balloons were having constant flights over the French territory without their permissions. So there started the effort to codify such laws. So this led to the development of the Paris Conference. Through the Paris Conference, there were organization of there were some rules that were formed. In that was the very basis, or you can say the start or the foundation stone for the formulation of the first ever international convention under international air law. That was the Paris Convention of 1990 that deals directly with the airspace. So the exclusive and complete sovereignty over the airspace above its territory was recognized in this very convention. Also, various aspects that were related to the innocent passage, also the cardinal principle of flying over each other's territories was evolved. And also there was an issue in regards to the focus was in regards to peace and prohibition of military use. So while we are talking about international air law, we are not discussing international air warfare. We are discussing civil law. We are discussing civil aviation law and aerial navigation. So navigation is transfer of one and to the another, to navigate, to move from one place to another. Okay. So, in this convention, the very first article, Article 1, which talks about that, contracting parties to this convention do recognize that every power has complete and exclusive sovereignty over the airspace above its territory. So the very first article of this convention, Paris Convention of 1919, described its airspace territory that is above, and it has the contracting parties have the whole control over its airspace that is above its territory. And the territory for this purpose would be the national territory as well as the territorial sea. Okay. Also in Article 2 under this Paris Convention provided that the parties who are consenting or contracting to this convention has to undertake that in time of peace, they should accord the principle of innocent passage and the freedom to provide innocent passage to the aircraft of other consenting or contracting parties of this Paris Convention. So also it talked about that aircrafts who are passing through another airspace territories or aerospace should bear their nationality and registration marks over their aircrafts, and also should have name if it's a private aircraft or a private machine, flying machine, then it should contain name and residence of its owner, so that the authorities of the territorial state have the right to visit every foreign private aircraft and also to verify its documents while it has landed or it has to depart from its own territory. So again, these rules were just in the time of peace. There was no rule in regards to during the time of war. So if there is a war and there could not be any overflights, and landing or of military aircraft was strictly prohibited under this convention. Okay, so this was about the main aspects of Paris Convention of 1919. It focused on civil aviation. It focused on the very connotation of international cooperation of air law and aerospace law, right? And also it described or led the foundation to the civil airlines and how to deal with various nation states so that they can have innocent passage over countries above its aerospace. Is it clear to you all? Paris Convention of 1919? Yes, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. So coming to the next convention, that is the Havana Convention. So in 1928, this was the many American states, or you can say the Western states, did not, agree to this European conventions or Paris Convention in this regard. So the American states decided to have a separate convention in regards to this aerial navigation. It was also developed on the very lines of Paris Convention, though. So in this, there were certain issues that were regulated, were spoken about in regards to air traffic. So what is air traffic? Who will land when? Which aircraft will fly when? So that there is no air accidents, or there are no, the orbit or the airlines are actually able to comfortably land and depart from their various territories or various nation states. So how do they smoothly function? Okay, so Havana Convention in this regards played a very important role. This was again, you know, in regards to this Havana Convention, it was based on similar principles only. There was no change, or there was no actual major change or that could be differentiated, but it also spoke about air traffic. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
So this was another, you can say, a development which was modulated to the Paris Convention. So again, as I was telling you, it had the similar principles, but it also talked about aerial traffic in particular, and again it was based on the similar principles, recognizing and having complete sovereignty over its airspace above its territory. But it also led to the development of rules regarding the air traffic. Is it clear? Moving on to the next, the Warsaw Convention. So the Warsaw Convention, again, Warsaw Convention was for unification of various rules in regards to international carriage. So international carriage and its liability regime. So, as we know that, while you're carrying stuff through air, so many, transportation is done through the air. Okay. So in this convention, it was described that what will be the liabilities of various nation states, okay, in regards to air carriage. Okay. So this in regards to carriage may be of persons, it could be of luggage or goods or whatever, what who will be responsible if there is some what do you call some there is some missing carriage in the aircraft. Okay, so this led to the development of liability laws under the air. So what are the liabilities in regards to this? So international carriage again is about carrying documents of the carriage, okay? And it has set certain air carriers liability and the limitations, bag checks, passenger tickets, luggage checks, ticketing of luggages, hand luggages, and their costings, and if there is any damage happened to the goods which was carrying that the persons were carrying, or maybe their luggage has been misplaced, what will be the compensation in regards to the damage that has occurred, or maybe there is the lost, if there is the misplacement or there is a loss of some carriage. Okay, so this is about the liability and damages, this convention in regards to the air carriages. Is it clear? So this convention actually unified the rules that are relating to international carriage by air. Okay, is it clear? Yes, class, is it making sense
Yes,
to you?
ma'am.
Okay. So the next and the most important convention that is the Chicago Convention. So actually what is the Chicago Convention is just what the air law is all about. Okay, so the air law, defined this through this convention also is known as Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation. So this is the very foremost, or you can say the Magna Carta of the airspace law. So This conference was held, the International Civil Aviation Conference, that is famously called, was held in November 1944. In order to commercialize air traffic and its rights and duties. So the agenda was about to regularize and commercialize air traffic and various rights and its duties. Okay, so again, the convention generally had three major parts. The first part deals with air navigation. Okay, so air navigation and its general principles. And second part is about the constitution of the very famous International Civil Aviation Organization. Okay, so this organization is still existing and is the, you can say, the only international organization that deals with civil aviation. So ICAO is very famous and it deals with most of the contentions in regards to international air law. So International Civil Aviation Organization and its constitution is being described under the second part of this convention. And the third part, which is again an important part, is dedicated to international air transport or international, transit or transport agreements. So, it is again based on uh, the only idea to develop this convention was taken up from the Paris Convention. And the confirmed principle of Paris Convention of having sovereignty of states over its airspace has been readily explained. Okay. And also it upheld that the contracting or the consenting states to this convention will have complete and exclusive sovereignty over its airspace. Similarly, this convention also defines the term territory. It says that the territory of a state shall be deemed to be the land areas, the territorial waters, and the sovereignty, suzerainty, and protection of mandate of such a state. So the above implies that the airspace above the territorial sea shall remain under the sovereignty of the coastal states, right? So article again, this led to the development of civil aircraft, and we do not have to confuse it between state aircraft. So Article 3 primarily spoke about civil aviation, civil international civil aviation. So we are not to confuse it with the state aircrafts or military aircrafts. So aircrafts are generally used in military, customs, police services that are not to be included under civil aircrafts. So this convention basically requires that every aircraft that wishes to fly or take benefit of this convention should be registered with the contracting states. So there is a council that has developed, there is a composition of ICAO council, that is International Civil Aviation Organization, has empowered to make a council under Article 77 to authorize the joint registrations of civil aircrafts between several nation states, and also has international registrations for the same. So it also drew two major agreements, that is about air transport, International Air Transport Agreement, and also International Air Services Agreement. So these two important decisions were also taken in this convention. So what is International Air Transport Agreement? It is, in this convention, we have the 5 freedoms of agreement. So the 5 freedoms of air was described in the International Air Transport Agreement that was discussed in the Chicago Convention. So the five freedoms according to ICAO were described. So what are the five freedoms? The first freedom is to have a peaceful transit. That without landing, there should be a privilege for the consenting or contracting parties to this convention. They could have the privilege to fly across each other's territory without landing. That is peaceful passage or peaceful transit. The second is the privilege to land and for non-traffic purposes. Okay, so the nation states comprising their aircraft, civil aircraft, could land, could refuel themselves, could repair or take refuge for a while without creating a traffic and without creating entering into their territory. They can take the usage of their airspace as well as land thereby, so that they can refuel, repair and take refuge from the area, that is halting. Okay, that the aircrafts could wait and halt up at the airports of various nation states, and they do not need to have any they should be peaceful in regards to that there should be a privilege, that is a freedom. So thirdly, also the freedom, the privilege was to put down the passengers, mail, cargo that are taken to the territory of a state whose nationality of the aircraft that they possess. So if the freedom that they can take traffic from homeland to any other country, and also vice versa, that there should be freedom to bring traffic from any country to the homeland. Okay, so if you belong to a nation state, a particular nation state, you can fly to another nation state and have a peaceful stay and have a peaceful, you can use that any other country. You can use that nation state and national, even if you don't possess the nationality of the other nation state. That is that you are visiting that nation state for the purposes of just for either studying or maybe for the purpose of travel, etc., etc. So the fifth freedom is about the privilege or the freedom to take on passengers, again, mail or cargo that is destined from territory of any contracting state, and the privilege to put down the traffic from any other such territory. So intermediate point, so that you can halt and thereafter can move to another nation state. So all these are the general five freedoms of air that are described, that you can use the nation states airspace as well as their land for peace and benefits of the air. Okay, so these were the international air transport agreement described under in this Chicago Convention through ICAO, International Council of Civil Aviation. Is it right? Am I clear to you all? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So coming to the next point, that is in regards to the International Air Services Transit Agreement. So what is air transit? Air transit is again what we described in five freedoms of air. That is from to refuel, repair or refuge, or also to pick up and discharge traffic at intermediate points. That way you are not using any of its airspace, but also their land. So this agreement, also known as Two Freedom Agreement, under this agreement, the parties thereby are to grant, I have agreed to grant to international air services the privileges or the freedoms to fly across their territory without landing, and the privilege to land for non-traffic purposes. So the first two freedoms are in regards to this, that the peaceful transit, as well as not to give any traffic in regards to the landing. So these two freedoms, again, in order to agree, are similar to the five freedoms, but it are commercially valuable and important because of their usage of reciprocity. If one nation state is helping the aircrafts of another nation state, it could be a reciprocal relation. Okay. So these are the basics of aerial navigation. It could be used and it could establish a very friendly relationship between nation states. And this is what the ICAO looks out for. Again, this is a very specialized agency of United Nations right now, and it provides for air navigation, and various treaties have been henceforth signed after its creation in 1944. Again, various treaties or conventions are in regards to, convention that are related to recognition of rights in aircraft. The again, Rome Convention of damage caused by various foreign aircrafts to the parties, and also concerning the liability laws and cargo convention related to it was conducted in Hague, and various protocols, and which led to the development of the Montreal Convention of 1999, which we'll be talking in later segment. That is the Montreal Convention of 1999. So all these have evolved and developed over the time, and in regards to the United Nations, it has benefited various aspects of aerial navigation on various lines of these, setting up international standards for air navigation. Okay, so this was about your first topic, that is air law, international air law, and freedom of air and sovereignty of its airspace. Is it clear to you all? Any questions so far? Yes, class?
No, ma'am.
Sure? Did you all
Yes.
follow?
Ma'am.
So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate. And I would encourage you all to come up with your, queries or whatsoever in regards to this concept, because it is a bit confusing topic, and do read about this. And again, it is a very important and a very emerging area of law. So if you want to pursue this law, it will, this area of law, this is in future going to be the most important aspect. Right after the COVID, it is the most emerging area of law, and various job opportunities, etc., are developing, and various, companies are taking up the people from specialized area of air law. Okay. Thank you. I have taken the attendance. Shall I close the class now?
Ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day. See you tomorrow.